Welcome to the Grace and Grit podcast, made for women who want their healthiest years to be ahead of them, not behind them. Join your host, Courtney Townley, right now as she breaks down the fairy tale health story you have been chasing all of your life into sensible action steps and lasting change. Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Grace and Grit podcast. This is your host, Courtney Townley. As always, I'm delighted you're here. I say this at the beginning of every show, but I'm grateful that you're here. I know there are a lot of podcasts that you could have in your ears right now. So the fact that you chose this one, it means a lot. And to those of you who keep returning week after week to this show, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Your listenership is appreciated way more than you know. And if you have been consistently listening to this show and you have never taken the time to rate or review the show on whatever platform you're listening from, it goes a long way in us helping to get this podcast into the ears of more listeners. So if you value what you hear on the show, if you think it is worthy of spreading out into the world and sharing with other people, rating and reviewing the show is one way to do that. And it's really helpful. I personally read reviews all the time, and it definitely dictates what I am going to spend my time and energy on. So thank you in advance if you do take that time. And if you've already rated and reviewed the show, if you would share the episode or any episode that was really a turning point for you, that touched you in some way or helped you to do better in some way, that too is a very simple and pretty effortless way to help support the show. We do keep this show ad-free very intentionally. I don't love listening to podcasts where I'm interrupted all the time by ads and marketing. And so we have elected to not be sponsored. That doesn't mean we don't still need help in spreading our message. So if you would be so kind to do that in whatever way you find fitting, that would be lovely. All right. Now, if you did not listen to the episode prior to this one, which was episode 356, in that episode, I announced that I was embarking into a 4-part series all about powerful aging. And episode 1, which was episode 356, so that was the first part of the series, we titled it Embracing Change. And that episode in particular introduced what power has to do with the aging process, but it also challenged the listener to really reconsider the mindset that they are bringing into the aging process, because ladies, it matters. You are not going to show up to do the work that you are being invited into within the aging process if you think about it in ways that prevent you from doing work. And so there is a level of acceptance and embracing that needs to happen. So if you have not listened to that first episode, go ahead and go back and listen to it. Again, episode 356. And today is really part 2 of this series, which is all about rethinking your approach and the strategies that you are using in order to age powerfully. So I do want to mention really quickly at the outset, I did this in the last episode, but I definitely want to just touch on it again. I think it's really important to clarify how we define power around here in the Grace and Grit world. So power is influence. It is your ability to influence yourself to take action around things that matter to you. So it is your ability to influence your thoughts, your emotions, and your behaviors to keep yourself in a space of integrity with yourself. Power is also vitality and life force. It is your ability to feel fully alive and lit up. And man, don't we all want that? We want to get out of bed in the morning just so excited for the day ahead. And that is absolutely possible at any age. And I also just want to remind you that power is capacity. It is our capacity to lean into hard things. It is our capacity to greet curveballs and rumble with unmet expectations in ways that do not destroy us, that do not break us down. So power is our capacity to influence ourselves, to feel fully alive, to heal ourselves in the ways that we need to be healed. So today, I would like to challenge you to rethink the approach that you are using to improve your health and wellness as you age. Because obviously, this whole series is about powerful aging, and it's my hope that we can get you into a space of generating and retaining as much personal power as you age as possible. Because at the end of the day, isn't that what we all want? We want to retain power to do the things that we want to be doing. Chasing our grandkids, hiking, skiing, whatever your thing is. And we also want to be able to retain power cognitively, thinking for ourselves and making choices and living on our own as long as possible. So generating and retaining power really require acknowledging two things. Probably more than two things, but two things that I really want to lean into today. Number one, we have to acknowledge that power is, of course, a limited resource. It's renewable, but we only get so much of it to spend every day. And how much we have to spend every day is really dependent on the work that we do to generate and retain power. So power is a limited resource. And restoring personal power is an exercise, in my opinion, in up-leveling self-respect. So just consider for a moment what respect is. Respect is extending honor and care. That's what it is. And just for a moment, I want you to consider, is that how you would describe your current approach to your own health and well-being? An act of extending honor and care. Now, for some of you listening, that might be a very hearty yes. For some of you, it might be like, sometimes. And for a lot of you, it's probably like, yeah, hell, definitely not. That is not how I would describe the approach that I'm taking to improve my health and well-being. And if that's you, I want you to know you're not alone. I work with women and consult with women nearly every single day who are not extending respect to themselves along the path to aging. And this is the very reason they're actually losing a lot of power as they age, more power than is necessary. Because let's be honest, none of us are immune to losing power as we age. That's part of the process. It's a natural process. But the more resilient we are and the more work we do to retain and restore power, that process is less accelerated. So a lot of women that I consult with are not respecting themselves. They are not respecting their physiology and the needs of their physiology. They're expecting. So rather than respecting, they're expecting. What the heck does that mean? Well, they expect a lot from their physiology and their brain and their emotional state. They expect it all to be performing in the way that they would like it to be performing, but with very little regard for what those systems need from them in order to perform at a high level. I also see a lot of women not communicating or listening to themselves, but rather dictating to themselves. So they aren't listening to the subtle signals that are always there, ladies. Your brain, your body, your emotional state your soul is always sending you messages about what maybe isn't working. And many of us have built amazing mechanisms to override those signals. And that comes at a huge cost. We lose a tremendous amount of power when we aren't listening and we're always dictating. I see an awful lot of women pushing hard all the time, 24/7, 365 days a year, and rarely, if ever, extending themselves the grace to pull back. We're bullying ourselves rather than extending kindness and compassion. I see a lot of women hiding from the work that they know will help them to be more powerful in their life rather than stepping out. I call this stepping out rather than fading out. I mean, yes, we could argue that aging is a natural process on some level of fading out. But if we work with our brain and we change the way that we're thinking about it, aging powerfully is really about owning where you are hiding in your life and starting to step out in those spaces to improve your health and wellness. For one person, that might be shifting careers, ending a career, right? For another person, it might look like learning how to start lifting weights. For another woman, it might look like having some tough conversations or maybe letting go of a few relationships. I also see a lot of women kind of disrespecting themselves in that they are trying to drink out of a fire hose when it comes to health and well-being, rather than just slowly improving their behaviors. And you know what I'm talking about. We've all been there, where we read or we see things online and we overhaul our life on Sunday night, expecting ourselves to wake up Monday morning and live in a completely different way in every single way. And usually by Monday afternoon, we are in that full faceplant. That's what I mean by trying to drink out of a fire hose. That approach is only going to induce more stress. And I also see a lot of women disrespecting themselves through the aging process, in that they're more concerned about getting people to like them still than they are about liking themselves. Now, I definitely see a lot of women pivoting on this at midlife as well. We kind of get less tolerant of people's opinions about us and our choices. And yet, if we don't start focusing more on learning how to like ourselves, man, do we create a lot of unnecessary suffering in trying to get everybody to like us. Now, I've often referred to midlife as the renovation years. If you've been a longtime listener, you've heard that term many times over. And I call midlife the renovation years because with biochemistry shifting at midlife, which it does in some pretty profound ways, we don't have the same resilience to stress. So this means that if you want to age powerfully, it's not a great idea to use approaches that induce a lot more stress if your stress bucket is already overflowing. So think about what renovation is. It is simply a process of returning something to an unimpaired condition. So it's making something healthier, right? That could be a home. It could be a car. It's making it more functional. And it could be with our physiology. It's a renovation process. Aging powerfully is a renovation process. And renovation really makes me think of things like integrity, structural integrity, cellular integrity, personal integrity. It also makes me think of resilience, having the capacity to still do the physical feats that we enjoy, the capacity to still process things in our brain. I spoke to those things earlier. And I also hear like fortification, right? We're really working towards renovation is a process of fortification. It's making things more solid. I've shared this many times. My husband is a builder, and he is really sort of I use this word very judiciously, but he is a master of renovation work. And that's what makes up a lot of his work is renovation. And when he goes in to renovate a home, it's not just taking down the things or taking apart the things that people aren't interested in anymore or they don't aesthetically like. There's often a lot of work around fortifying the structure because these are often older homes or they're damaged homes in some way. And so there is a part of the renovation process that is all fortification. It's just making the frame more sturdy. It's making the house more insulated, whatever the case may be. And it's not the pretty part. It's not the part people walk in and see, but it's what makes it really pleasant to live there. So the approaches that you use to improve or maintain your health and well-being as you age definitely have the potential to accelerate the aging process rather than slowing it down. And that, my friends, is not what you want. I don't know anyone who's ever said, hey, can you show me some ways to accelerate the aging process? It doesn't happen. So again, we need to recognize that aging is naturally a process of losing power on a biochemical level. Now, don't become a Debbie Downer about that. We're all experiencing it. But here's what I mean specifically. Aging is naturally a process of losing hormones, right? So we all, I think listening to this show know that perimenopause and menopause is basically a process of losing hormones that help us to manage stress. Estrogen, progesterone being two of those crucial hormones. So again, we are not as capable on a biochemical level of managing stress with the loss of those hormones unless we are doing things that help us to retain capacity. And that can look like a lot of things. It can look like strength training. It could look like changes in your diet, changes in your sleep hygiene. It could look like hormone replacement therapy. It could look like getting on some kind of supplementation. It can look like a lot of things. Aging is also naturally a process because of this hormonal shift of losing cellular integrity. So your mitochondria are those powerhouses of your cell that produce energy and really are at the most sort of micro level, they are your source of vitality. And as we age, because of lifestyle, because of environment, because of genetics, because of a lot of things, mitochondria become dysfunctional. So mitochondrial function starts to decline, which has a lot of consequences. So we lose power as we age because we lose muscle mass, right? That sarcopenia, if you've ever heard that term, is the loss of muscle. We lose bone density. So a lot of you are familiar with osteoporosis, osteopenia. And again, if we fortify these systems as we age, we can combat these conditions to some degree, not entirely, but we can combat them with quite a bit of power. We also have a loss of cognition, right? When things are going askew hormonally with our biochemistry in terms of the mitochondria, with our gut health, so many things, our brains don't function as well. So again, I'm not saying this, I'm not reminding you of this to make this a depressing episode. I just do want to highlight that the natural process of aging is a loss of power. And we can accelerate that loss by keeping a lot of unnecessary stress in our life. So not learning how to manage our brain, because we create a tremendous amount of unnecessary stress by the way that we think. It's keeping commitments because we feel like we have to or we should, when internally we really don't want to and we don't necessarily need to. That creates a lot of unnecessary stress. We talk so much about unnecessary stress on this show, so I won't go too deep into that. But what also helps to decelerate the aging process and the loss of power is actually the opposite. It's getting very intentional about the stress you allow into your life. So again, just hear what I said there because it sounds like it's contradicting, right? These two statements are contradicting each other. What causes loss at an accelerated pace is unnecessary stress. What helps us to decelerate loss is intentional stress. So again, I know it sounds like a contradiction, but hear me out. Not all stress is bad. Stress is actually what helps us to do those things I talked about earlier, to fortify, to become more resilient, right? But it has to be the right kind of stress in the right amount. So you've heard me, again, probably talk about this before if you're a longtime listener, but I've never heard or thought of an image that works better than this. I think of stress as a bucket. You only have so much room in your bucket for stress. And the stress in your bucket is made up really of two different kinds of stress. There's distress, which is unnecessary stress, things that break you down at an accelerated rate. So eating a lot of sugar, drinking a lot of alcohol, never moving your body, only getting 4 hours of sleep a night. These kinds of things are distress. Thinking about your life in a way that just makes you feel completely defeated, that's distress. But the other kind of stress in your bucket is eustress. Eustress is the type of stress that actually helps to build us up. It helps to fortify us. It helps us to reclaim power. So these are things like learning new skills, being very intentional about building muscle mass, challenging your brain in new ways, learning behaviors that will actually help you to live a healthier lifestyle. There is a level of stress that goes along with all of those things, but in the right dose, they help to fortify you rather than break you down. So obviously, we want more eustress and less distress in our life. But it's also really important that I remind you that your bucket only has so much capacity always. And so even if your bucket is completely full of just the good kind of stress, the kind of stress that brings us to life and ultimately helps to fortify us, too much eustress can also break you down. So here's an example. Imagine you got your dream job across country, so you had to move away from your family and friends. And at the same time, you decided to start a very aggressive exercise program with a pretty extreme calorie deficit. Now, any of those things on their own might be an exercise in fortification, right? In helping you to build. But all of those things at once, your bucket will overflow and will ultimately break you down, even though these things on their own are all wonderful things, or can be. I shouldn't say they're always wonderful, but they can be. So, systems that need to be respected in order to maintain power as we age. I like to kind of break them into three main parts. Number one, your mitochondria. I talked about the mitochondria earlier. And in the next episode of the show, we're only talking about mitochondria, basically. Like we're really tackling powerful aging from the level of biochemistry. So we're going to be talking about things that we can do to help support ourselves on a cellular level. And I actually have my friend Lainey Gray coming in to have that conversation with me, which I'm really excited about. But today, what I want to talk about in terms of two other systems that actually could be defined as the same system are the nervous system and our brain, right? So your brain is a part of your nervous system, but for this conversation, I kind of like to separate them into two different categories. But are your strategies for aging powerfully, honoring your nervous system and your brain? I'm going to say for most women out there, the answer is no, because I work with women all day, every day. And these are the systems that I see being so wildly disrespected. And it's not even intentional. So a lot of women maybe don't know better, or they've just been in a habit of living a certain way for so long that they've never slowed down to reconsider the cost of their approach. So a lot of women, and you may be able to identify with this, a lot of women that I work with are living in a state of sympathetic overdrive. So their nervous system is so activated in the sympathetic mode, which is fight or flight. In other words, they have so much stress in their life at all times that their body is always dumping out a ton of cortisol into their system. And the way the nervous system is intended to work is to oscillate between periods of intensity, fight or flight, and periods of rest and recovery, right? So we push into fight or flight to get things done, to learn new things, all the things. And then we intentionally give ourselves periods of rest and recovery in order to restore power so we can go at it again. That is not how most people live. You may be one of them. Most people are living in a state of always pushing down the gas pedal and never pulling over to refuel. Not a great approach, because cortisol is very catabolic, which means it breaks down the body in a myriad of ways. So cortisol is lovely. We want it. We just don't want it in high quantities all the time. Second to that, I would say a lot of women, when they consider the approaches that they are using to improve their health and well-being, they're disrespecting their brain. Your brain has so much work to do every single day. It is making so many decisions and it's doing so many processes. And when it comes to behavior change, we delude ourselves into thinking that we can take on a lot of big change very quickly and make it sustainable. And that's not actually respecting the brain. The brain needs small doses of change because it's contending with a lot of other things. So, are your current strategies respecting your nervous system and respecting your brain? The other thing that, before we get into some tips and tricks I have here for you of what I think is really important to pay attention to when it comes to approach, is to consider what your signs of misalignment are. This is something I always lean into with my students and my clients. We talk a lot about recognizing your own misalignment. So when your nervous system is dysregulated, when you are overwhelming your brain, when you are not respecting your physiology at the cellular level, what does that look like for you? Well, if you're anything like me or the people that I work with, it probably looks like reactivity, fatigue, weight gain, overwhelm, distraction, joint pain, a lot of complaining, feeling checked out, unable to focus, powerlessness. That is often what it feels like. It feels like I'm literally losing power, and there are consequences to that. I don't have the capacity to regulate my emotions, to honor the basic needs of my physiology, right? So signs you are misaligned often look like powerlessness. It looks like you're losing power, not generating power. But I'd really challenge you to consider, how does misalignment show up for you? Okay, so rethinking your approach. I want to talk about just a few things that I think are really key in that, so you have some tangible takeaways. And keep in mind, these are just mentionables. It's never an exhaustive list, right? I never want these podcasts to be like 4-hour shows. I do deeper dives into all of these types of things in my community inside of Rumble and Rise, which is a paid membership. So if you ever want more, you want to travel with community, you want more of a process, check out graceandgrit.com/ready to rumble. You can find out all of the details of membership there. Okay, so the first thing I would say when reconsidering our approach is you have to take time to check in. In other words, you have to start developing practices of awareness, which means you pay attention to how you're living your life. You make time to acknowledge your misalignments and what's contributing to that. You take ownership and responsibility for your total stress load and what that stress load is made up of. Awareness is 101. We will never change our approach to anything unless we first expose. We take a good look at what's actually going on. And we have to do that exercise. I know I say this like a broken record, but we have to do that exercise with compassion and grace and curiosity, not judgment. The mean girl does not come in the room when we are in the practice of exposing what's truly going on. The mean girl's not invited. I would also say that we need to make a plan to protect our power, right? Like any kind of meaningful change in your life is not going to happen just by willy-nillying it or throwing spaghetti at the wall or just trying a couple things on once in a while for a few days. We have to have a plan of attack. We have to have an actual approach. So this doesn't have to look like anything complicated, and it also doesn't have to look like signing up for any kind of program that someone else went through to line out their pathway. It simply looks like getting very intentional about how you spend power in the day. And how you spend power, what I mean by that is a couple things. Number one, what are you spending your time on? Are you spending time on things that bring you alive, with people that bring you alive, in spaces that bring you alive? Or are you spending a lot of time doing things that you hate, with people you don't like or who don't bring out the best in you, in places that you really don't feel comfortable in? So we have to get intentional about all of that, which always comes down to decision making, which I've done 100 episodes on, maybe not 100, but a lot. We have to be willing to make strong decisions around these kinds of things. But the other piece of this, planning to protect your power, right, to generate power, also looks like getting intentional in the scheduling of your day to regulate your nervous system. Man, I coach on this a lot because I work with a lot of very busy women, women who still have maybe kids in the house or maybe don't have kids, but have their own businesses, have a lot of other responsibilities. I mean, their schedules are jam-packed. And they hire me because they're feeling so out of sorts. They are not feeling powerful, but they want to reclaim power. So one of the first things we look at is how they're actually living their life. And no surprise, they're often living in a way that completely disrespects the nervous system. There is no time for decompression in their day until they walk in the door at the end of the day. They are totally exhausted, stressed, and hungry. And what do you think that does to their behavior? What do you think they do? They drink, they eat, they stay up late watching Netflix because they are so desperate to soothe their nervous system. But I'm telling you this, if you start pollinating just tiny specks of decompression and a little rest into the day, 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there, 10 minutes longer on your lunch break, you start noticing that you show up differently later in the day. Because that's what your nervous system needs from you. It is willing to push. It is so capable of pushing. But it also needs the pulling back. And I have never found a way to help people with this without addressing their schedule, without addressing planning and organizing themselves for the day in a way that allows them to generate and protect their own power. Also, I would say self-imposed limits is definitely something that needs to be addressed in terms of the approaches that you're using. Sure, we would all love to be able to do anything at any time in as much quantity as we want. We would all love that. That'd be great. But that's not how it works. Like, that is not what feeds our power. Self-imposed limits, boundaries for ourselves are actually in tribute to protecting and generating power as we age. That's the truth of it. Nobody likes that truth. I know. And yep, there's that dirty word here called discipline, where we do, to some degree, need to constrain how much of things we're doing. That might be working. It might be eating sugar. It might be complaining. I mean, there's all kinds of things that we are doing too much of that is causing us to lose power. So I like to think and remind my students that boundaries are an act of love. Every year, we do a class on boundaries inside of my community. Next month is our month for talking about boundaries, which is the month of May. And I always introduce boundaries as an act of love. It is a high level of self-respect. Setting boundaries with other people is an act of love for relationships, because you're literally telling somebody, I care enough about this relationship to let you know how I want to be in relationship. And boundaries with self are very similar. It's a way of respecting the relationship that you have with yourself. So if you want to do a deeper dive into this, Boundaries for Breakthroughs was an episode that I did, 348, I believe is the number. And it was talking all about the upside of self-imposed limits. And you can listen to that for more on that. But I do think that this is just such a crucial piece of our approach to powerful aging. We have to acknowledge that limits are needed, that I do need to set limits in my life with other people, but also with myself. I also love to remind people that a healthy part of the powerful aging approach is starting to cultivate a self-soothing menu that honors your well-being. Because ladies, we have so many self-soothing strategies that are killing us, right? Think of all the things that you do when you're tired, when you're stressed, when you're bored. I would probably wager that a lot of those things are not promoting health and well-being. We're eating, we're drinking, and please don't hear me saying that eating isn't healthy. Of course it is, but we're not eating things that promote health, right? We go for the sugar, the fat, the salt when we aren't feeling our best. We drink. Some people do drugs, right? We reach for anything that will just make us feel better quicker, which is the buffering. And buffering has a lot of long-term consequences to our health and well-being. So a self-soothing menu is a list of things that you could do to honor your nervous system's need for decompression. These things are not effortful. You don't want them to be effortful, right? Because a stressed out body doesn't want to apply a lot more work. So when you're stressed, can you go for a walk in nature? Can you sit with your pet and just intentionally be with that animal, touching them, cuddling with them, all the things? Can you allow yourself to sit down and read a book? Can you focus on your breath for a period of time? What are the things that help you to decompress in ways that keep you well? That's what a self-soothing menu is. And so two other things I want to mention that are definitely worth considering in your approach to powerful aging is starting to practice allowing yourself to feel urges of disrespect without giving into them. What the heck does that mean? We have urges all day long to do things that will disrespect our body's needs. And you have urges all day long for all kinds of things that you don't give into. You might have an urge to say something to a coworker that you don't say. You might have an urge to not go to work today. You might have an urge to, I don't know, postpone something or procrastinate on something. But you kind of coach yourself through the process of not doing that thing because you don't want to deal with the consequence of giving into that urge. So you already have the ability to allow urges that create problems, right? Just allow them. Don't give into them. Just allow yourself to feel it. But when it comes to, like, again, the food, the drinking, the whatever it might be for you, right? It's really tempting to build a habit out of giving in to certain urges. And so I'm a big believer that a huge part of powerful aging is, I said it earlier, the self-imposed limits, and also allowing yourself just to feel an urge as a vibration in the body. It's not an emergency. It's not something that has to be given into. But with certain things, we are so out of practice with that it almost feels impossible. So this week, I would just challenge you to delay gratification around something you normally just immediately give yourself permission for. Maybe it's chips, right? Maybe it's chocolate. Maybe it's skipping the gym. Like, I don't know what it's going to be for you. But just give yourself a few moments to just lean into feeling that urge without actually letting the urge drive the car. So you're not giving over to it. And then the last thing I wanted to mention, which I think is so important in our approach to powerful aging, is celebrating rises, celebrating moments of power, because they're all around you. But we have such a habit of focusing on the areas we don't have power, the things we need to improve in order to get more power. And that's great and helpful to some degree. But when we don't acknowledge where we're improving and where we are already getting payoffs for our work, we just kind of start to feel deflated by all of it. So I always encourage people to keep a victory log, right? And the first question I ask in any coaching call, whether it's a group coaching call or a private coaching call, is where are you rising? Where are you feeling powerful? What have you done this week to generate or protect your power? Because those things are everywhere. You are doing those things, and it's really important we acknowledge them. Because when we feel good, we want to do more of the things that make us feel good. And winning, retaining, generating power, it feels really good. Okay, my friends, I hope that was helpful. Next week, we are going to do, like I said, a conversation all about supporting biochemistry. So we're going to talk more about the nitty-gritty of what needs to shift in terms of how we approach exercise and how we're tackling our diet and considerations for aging powerfully on the chemical level that I don't think we're talking about enough and that maybe some people aren't even aware of. So again, I'm going to be joined by my friend Lainey Gray, and it'll be awesome. So that will be the next episode 358, which drops, I think I said next week, but we do bi-weekly podcasts, so it will be in 2 weeks. All right. Again, I hope it was helpful. If it was, please rate and review the show or share it with someone who you think could benefit from the message. You're amazing. I'm cheering you on. And aging powerfully is just so possible for you. So I am cheering you on all the way to that end. All right, my friends, have a great couple of weeks, and I will see you again very soon. Take care. Thank you for listening to the Grace and Grit podcast. It is time to mend the fabric of the female health story, and it starts with you taking radical responsibility for your own self-care. You are worth the effort, and with a little grace and grit, anything is possible.